He who will believe will see. I still hear those words ringing in my mind like on the first day. They are the ones that have animated my soul, my spirit, and that have nourished me with hope. My name is Charlotte. I am 36 years old. I live in Quebec, BC in Canada. I am an entrepreneur and I own a large clothing store for women and children. Before continuing my story, I invite you to subscribe and don't forget to activate the notification bell so you don't miss out on new stories. I got married very young, at the age of 20 to be precise. I had just obtained my high school certificate. I had no intentions of continuing my studies. Passionate about trade and fashion, I had decided to set up my own business. After a few months, with the support of my husband, I'd opened a clothing store. It was the start of a very promising career for me. I was at the height of my joy and my husband was proud of me. Mark, that's his name. He was a perfect man in my eyes. He was handsome, smart, kind, and caring. At least he was until the day the doctor let us know that I could not have children. After 2 years of marriage, I still couldn't conceive. However, Mark and I were impatient to have a child. Under the influence of pressure from my in-laws and the many questions we had in our minds, we made an appointment with a doctor for him to examine me. It was finally after multiple examinations that the famous verdict tainted my entire being. That day, the doctor had seen us around 1 p.m. I was so anxious that I didn't go to the store before going to the hospital. As he held the envelope in his hand, the one from the final test that would determine my fertility status, I felt my heart leap from within. It was beating so loudly you could hear it. The doctor opened the envelope, which was still sealed. He read the contents and marked a moment of silence, then he said, "Mr. Mark, your wife unfortunately cannot have children. She has a birth defect in the uterus. She has very little luck because her uterus cannot hold a fetus." These words resonated in my mind like a stab in my heart. My hands started shaking. Sweat was dripping down my face as if I had just done a sprint race. Mark, very surprised, asked the doctor, "Doctor, is there a possibility? However slight it may be." "Not really, except a miracle from God." "But doctor, what can we do?" "Mr. Mark, if you believe in God, pray. You can get a miracle." I felt my strength abandoning me little by little, as if the last energy that still existed in my body was being removed. I opened my mouth to say something, but no sound was audible. I just burst into tears. My husband took my hands and said, "Charlotte, calm down, please, sweetie. This is not the end of the world. There can still be a solution." Back home, Mark bent over backwards to cheer me up. He did all he could, but failed. I even remembered that I had lost my ability to talk. I thought of nothing but killing myself. I was on the verge of suicide. This news had paralyzed my whole being. I spent my days in the bedroom crying. Despite Mark's best efforts, I couldn't bring myself to do it. A kid. I only need a child, I repeated to myself all the time in my thoughts. Time was passing and my state of mind was slowly deteriorating. But I still noticed that Mark was no longer really present at home. He came home later and most often slept on the couch in the living room. Despite the situation I was going through, I realized that I had completely forgotten about him. One evening, I decided to wait for him before going to bed. He came home very late that evening, drunk. "Mark, what's the matter with you?" I asked. He pushed me away violently and shouted, "Barren woman, get out of my house." I didn't really realize what was going on. Why was he treating me like that? I ran to my room to take refuge, my eyes filled with tears. I had no idea that this was only the beginning of my suffering. The next day, I received a visit from my mother-in-law. Usually, before her arrival, she took the trouble to call me. But that day, she entered the house with fury like a lioness. It looked like she had gone wild. "Where is she? Where is that witch? Welcome, Mom? Who are you calling Mom?" "But Mom, what's the problem?" "Witch? Barren woman. Get out of this house." Before realizing what was happening, I discovered that Mark had told everything to his mother and that the latter had come to kick me out. All of this flashed before me like in a movie. I quickly went to my room and started crying to ease my pain, crying to take refuge. Is it my fault? Where is my mistake? I spent the whole evening there. That same evening, Mark was surprised to see his mother. "Good evening, Mother. What are you doing here? When did you arrive?" "I just arrived." "Hope you had a safe trip?" "Yes, my son, I did. You didn't let me know you were coming." I came to take your barren wife out of this house. No, mother, please don't make a fuss. Charlotte is my wife, and despite her problems, she remains as such. I will never accept that. I want to see my grandchildren. Mom, please stay out of this. I will find a solution. I spent the whole night and the next day in the bedroom without leaving, avoiding any altercation with my mother-in-law. I spent 2 days there without eating or drinking. And all this time, Jean-Marc didn't even try to hear from me. He spent all his time at work and came home just to take a bath and come out. A week later, my mother-in-law returned home, asking her son to take a new wife. The more time passed, the more Jean-Marc moved away from me. I had become invisible to him. He spent a lot of time away from home. Sometimes he would go out and only come back after 2, 3, even 4 days without giving me any explanation. One evening, I decided to look in his mailbox to see if he was having an affair with another woman. My suspicions turned out to be true. Jean-Marc was having an affair with another woman, Emmy, his secretary. Overwhelmed by the pain of never having a child, by the fear of losing my husband, and by the despair that took over my whole being, only one thought came to my mind, that of committing suicide. I headed to my dresser to grab the pills I could swallow to die. Yes, I wanted to die. At the same time, I received the message from a friend who knew everything I was going through. It was a WhatsApp message that read, "He who will believe will see. Have the faith and you will see the glory of God fulfilled in your life." I reread this message several times over a long period of time. I didn't know why I read it so many times, but I knew that I would find the solution to my multiple problems through these words. Lord, if you are still alive, act in my life. I also want a child. Save my marriage, I said. I remember that, after having pronounced these words, Jean-Marc had just entered the house. He entered the room and found me there on my knees praying. He asked me in an almost inaudible tone if he could join me in prayer. A few months passed, and Jean-Marc and I, triggered by prayer and faith in God, found the stability lost in our home. Supported by my friend, I joined a prayer group, and together we interceded for my situation. One morning, when I was feeling bad, Jean-Marc offered to take me to the hospital before going to his office. After the exams, I learned that I am already 2 months pregnant. Flooded with joy, happiness, I announced the good news to my husband, and a few months later, I gave birth to twin girls. Yes, I was doubly blessed.